All right, we are recording. Cool. This is a 51 Vets case study with Mike Morlino, and we're going to be talking about his transition from over 20 plus years in the SEAL teams to getting his MBA at MIT to then getting basically an internship at a private equity backed company and navigating some, pretty difficult times in the transition, but he has landed a fantastic role at Boston Solar, where he is a director and handling everything, including a lot of operationally focused roles and functions. So, Mike, it is awesome to have you here and to be talking about a case study with you transitioned. But let's just kind of set the context. And where were you 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 12 months ago? If you could just kind of set the transition context after you spent over 20 plus years in the teams.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, it's an honor to be here. I appreciate it, Jordan. Yeah, so like you said, I did 22 years in the Navy and went straight into my MBA. In fact, I timed my retirement to the start of an MBA program, so I stepped into the program the day that I retired from the Navy. Something I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but nonetheless, it was a great experience. It kept me busy. I did the accelerated MBA, the 1 year MBA at MIT Sloan. The benefit to doing that was I was able to take advantage of the full-time schooling opportunity, but not have the opportunity cost of being out of the workforce for 2 years. Um, Now the drawback to that was, no summer internship, and 1 year, even 2 years is not a lot of time to think about what you're going to do next. And so before I knew it, it was time to graduate. I had been doing some work while at MIT to prepare for potential role in consulting. That continued when I graduated, and I began the full-time job search over the summer, looking for roles in consulting, management consulting, doing the case prep interviews and all of that. But I just was not able to gain any traction. Unfortunately, just a tough hiring environment, and ultimately that's when I reached out to you guys, and when you
Yeah.
were able to connect me with the transition advisory team.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to this next stage, which is when you had to kind of pop a flare like, hey, I need help now with this transition, got family to take care of, and there's a shot clock on here. I think one of the things that 51 Vets really helped out with was putting a transition advisory board around you. And I think it was getting almost like to daily communication, and it was basically like a template email to that transition advisory board to say, hey, as a reminder, here's my situation, your updates on the connections you have made for me at these companies. Here's the feedback I'm getting. And it was daily communication and just staying in front of that small group of advisors from private equity, investment banking, and others in our network. And I think that not only led to a part-time role, but I think most importantly, it gave you like a team that you're not just by
Yeah,
yourself out there.
yeah, you really can't understate that, the importance of that. I mean, here I am coming out of the MBA, spending the entire summer looking for work, and just things are not happening. And I was starting to to doubt myself and my that things might not happen. Maybe this isn't what I was meant to do. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong areas. And when the transition team was assigned to me, it was really it just put me in a position where people were to have people looking out for me, helping me. It really yeah, it did a lot for me. You know,
Yeah.
from
And
from that perspective, but also it was very focused. I kind of knew what I wanted to do. I knew that private equity operations was of interest to me, and something that I had looked into while I was at MIT. So it wasn't difficult for me to decide that's what I wanted to do when I pivoted. But man, I can't even begin to think about how long it would have taken me had I decided to make that pivot on my own. Just it was so accelerated by having business leaders in the industry that I could speak to every day, and really just the introductions and the opportunities began to pour in.
Yeah.
So
Well, it eventually led to a 3-month project-based role with Windjammer Capital. And Greg Bondick, who's the managing partner of Windjammer, is on our advisory board for 51 Vets, but he was also on your transition advisory board. Windjammer has brought on 3 people. You were the third person at a portfolio company. But can you kind of walk through what was the portfolio company that you were on? What was the
yep.
broad responsibility? And like, what did you actually do throughout those 3 months?
Yeah, that's a really good question. First of all, Greg and his team are fantastic. It was just an incredible opportunity to work with not only them but the folks at Fecon, which is the portfolio company that you mentioned. It's a heavy equipment manufacturer, so they manufacture tractors and mulching heads for large excavators and other carriers, for the vegetation management industry. And so my role was essentially that of a chief of staff for the COO, working on special projects. And it really where most of those projects took place was they were on the production floor, and the projects were aimed at increasing efficiency and output, uh, production line design, optimization, automation integration, vertical integration. I also had the opportunity to work on a training development program for hourly employees. So it really allowed me to leverage my project management, my leadership experience that I had developed over 2 decades in the Navy, and apply it. And what I found was it was a huge confidence booster for me, because I found that, I have the skills necessary to be impactful in the private sector. I just needed to be given a shot. So
What were some of the challenges that you kind of faced in maybe the first month of going into it?
yeah, I think more than anything, it was just like most industries, it's they each have their own languages. So learning that lean manufacturing, and trying to understand that in the face of being impactful and working on projects. There's definitely a learning curve there, but I would say overall that was probably my biggest challenge, because the people were great, and it doesn't matter if you're in the military or if you're working on a production plant floor. People are people, and the quicker you can relate to them and build trust, the quicker you can get a lot accomplished. So
So that kind of leads us to the next phase, which is your current role as a director at Boston Solar. Like, first off, what is Boston Solar? How did you find the job? What was the process like? And kind of generally, what are you doing?
yeah, so Boston Solar is a solar installation company, both working on the residential as well as commercial installation. I was connected to some folks in the organization through a 51 Vets member, actually, and so yeah, that kicked off a series of conversations, and here I am now trying to learn the new industry again. But again, I see it as a great opportunity for me to leverage my skills and learn a new industry.
And what was uh the 51 Vets member like? How did he connect you with the company, or like what was that process like?
Yeah,
Was it a
so
LinkedIn post or a tweet or something?
it was a tweet. Yeah, so one of the members does not really care too much for LinkedIn, and really my only exposure to social media is LinkedIn. I don't know anything else. He said, "You know what? I've had a lot more success with Twitter." And he said, "Would you mind if I put something out, a tweet out about you, and kind of what you're looking for?" And I was like, "Sure, go ahead. What could hurt?" And sure enough, within 24 hours, it had over 70,000 views. And the emails started coming in with people that were looking for someone like myself in for the roles that I was looking for in the Boston area. So it was fantastic, and one of those happened to be Boston Solar.
I think the interesting part about one of the many interesting parts about your transition is that it kind of reminds me of what other 51 Invest members have experienced with their EMBA with Brian Santos at Duke. You know, he got his job at a private equity backed company and he's still doing his MBA at Duke. Sean Dowling is doing his MBA, I think also at Duke. Maybe, or I'm forgetting the episode I literally just shot with him, but he's doing
I
it
believe
at
so. I believe you're right.
so we have you're like the third example of it's not a full-time MBA and using that to really help pay the bit like to get an education, but also find something that's going to be paying the bills as opposed to just 2 years off and I'll work after that. And I think it's really interesting because it just from these conversations, what I've learned is that you're able to not just see the academic stuff in the class, but like just directly see how business is run and the academics in practice. But I'm
Yes.
curious, kind of like why you decided to do that particular MBA.
Yeah, no, there are a couple of reasons. One of them just happens to be that, I happen to be very data focused, and of course, being an engineering school and very data centric in their studies, and everything is it's included in every course. Quantitative approaches that fascinated me, but also it's very unique in that. MIT offers a full-time executive MBA program. Like I had mentioned, the 1 year, but it's for an executive level crowd. Um, and so all folks that were my age, it's only about 100 people in the class. It's heavily international, so 75% international. So you get a really good, well-rounded experience, both from an academic side, but also from a very unique cohort of folks. And really, that's those are just a few of the reasons that drew me to that.
So when you look back at your transition, what are some of the things that you felt like you really did well during it? And what are some things that, you would advise others to learn from it, maybe just some of the hiccups in the road and some of the hurdles that you had to go over?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say be patient. First of all, you know, uh, there were a lot of things that I expected to happen. Not that I expected to get a job or that felt like I was owed a job or anything like that, but I think when I did the MBA, especially, it really it just wasn't happening as quickly as I thought it would, and that can tend to really get you down and make you second guess a lot of your decisions. So I would just say, understand the realistic, timelines that are often associated with actually landing a role. I would also, say use every opportunity, and this is something I got, to know a little bit more, the importance of it a little bit more later in my journey, but understand how you can really um, be able to tell your story. How can you really tell your story and how it relates and how you can solve problems for folks in the private sector? Because what I did do, which I regret, was I spent a lot of time trying to convince people of my value. And there are people that out there that get it, and there are people that just don't. And so I would say go where you're valued, go where people recognize your value, the value that you bring, and don't waste time trying to convince people that may never get it.
How do you bridge the gap between not trying to convince people who will never get it and the group of people who just don't get it and they need to be sold? They're like, oh, wait, that's what you could do? Oh my God, yes, I need that as my VP of operations or chief of staff or director of special projects for 150 to $200,000 base. And I just didn't know it because nobody's ever told me about this. Like, how did you kind of manage that?
Just through a lot of conversations with people that had already kind of gone ahead of me, who had been in, had actually made the successful transition into leadership roles in business, and just learning a little bit more about, okay, well, how would you tell this story? How would you tell, my story if you were me? Because they have been able to already or they've already made that bridge that gap because they've already been on the have been successful post transition, but they also remember where they came from. So they're I would say talking to those people, you know to know it like continuously, um
Yeah.
to make
And
sure that are able to successfully tell your story, because everybody is valuable, and everybody can bring value, but really I underestimated the ability to tell a story, to tell a good story that resonates.
and I think it helps to go through the exercise of mapping the target job description to your experience.
100%.
And and it's okay if it's in a different industry, but if you just come up with a list of a couple of job functions and then the job description to that as director of special projects, as a chief of staff, as a VP of operations, and then you list out the typical job requirements, and then you list out your background, and then you map it. And you're like, here's what I did. Here's what you need. I can do this.
You're
And I,
absolutely right. You're absolutely right, and I think it's very important to map it out in the way that you said, but also to leverage the expertise of others to help you in that translation, because
yep.
it's not always it is obvious, but it's not, coming from the military, and it's a different language
That's
in
why you have
business
to
world.
reach
So
out to the transition advisory board. That's why you have to reach out to people cold on LinkedIn and tell people like, hey, I'm
precisely,
a transitioning veteran. I just need some help mapping my experience to jobs in your field. Can I have 15 to 30 minutes with you? People will help you. And just ask them like,
you're
what
right.
do you actually do? And what do I do? And be like, oh, well, I can kind of do that. Or no, I can't. No, don't want to do that. But I think it's just
Yeah.
through getting tons and tons of reps in the gym of
Yep.
talking with so many people that you start to see what industries do you like? What job functions do you like? What do you like? What do you have some experience, but maybe you're not as qualified? Cool. Well, how do you fill those gaps? That only comes through having these conversations in a thoughtful way with like also clear action steps afterwards
Yes. Yeah,
of
you're exactly right. I think that was one of those things that I wish that I had approached this transition with that at the forefront, is having thoughtful, like, what do I want to get out of this conversation? Because there were a lot of conversations where I just, was kind of going through the motions because I was learning how to network, but you really have to go in with specific asks, and really try to get the most out of these conversations, because it might be the only time you ever talk to this person.
and and there are other people like there are some people who their value to you and what they want out of it is just to be that 30-minute call, just to give you a little bit more exposure, maybe one connection. But then there are other types of people called your super connectors, and you have to identify and stay close to and consistently update your super connectors. And the one way to do that is, let's say that, you know, like one of our advisors for you, I think it was Jeremy Holland and
Yep.
Greg and me,
Yep.
is just by keeping us updated with your transition, it allows us to continually iterate on the types of connections that we should do. But you always stay close to those super connectors because they are great at like, oh, you want to talk to somebody in this industry at this function? Cool. 3-second email, done.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
and I think it's also one of the things I found successfully transition people do is also just the frequency and clear communication through the transition. Like your advisors and your networks want to hear from you. They want to know that that connection they made for you went somewhere. Or if it didn't, perfectly cool. At least you followed up.
Yeah.
Um, what what is it
Exactly.
if you had to kind of do it again, to kind of summarize all of this, if you had to do it again, what is the 80/20 of a successful transition? Like, what are the super few things like you have to get this right to have 80% of the benefit?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely think, consistently about what it is that you really want to do and what's going to make you happy. And even if it's something that you're just, you know, that you just want to explore, that you have those things narrowed down, because you're going to be able to get a lot more help out of people if you at least go into it knowing the areas that you want, that you want to explore. I think I tend to think that I thought I knew that what I wanted, but at the same time there was a lot of time where I spent figuring things out, and that's okay. That's part of it. But I think going back to what we said before is just having a really thoughtful approach about how I was doing my networking. That was one of the good things that the transition team helped me with, was really, not only the sit rep, like going through that cadence every day, but also having a good way to track everything. Like I did it on the Excel workbook where I
I want
was,
to, you got to like, that's one important thing that we forgot is like have an Excel tracking sheet
yeah,
because you can send that to your advisors and say, can we review this together? Here are the 5 consulting firms that I've spoken with. Here's who I spoke with.
yep,
Here was the result. Because they can say, well, here are 5 more that you haven't put on your list, or
exactly.
spoke to John Smith, but you should have spoken to Jane Smith. By the way, I know Jane Smith really well. Let's take a different approach. There is one of our firms in our network that is a great example of how to take a different approach. So there's a very large private equity firm, and one way that we have filtered people to them is from the top down to the portfolio. But what we found is a more effective way is to go to the portfolio company heads and to get those interviews. And we have access to both points.
Yeah,
So the takeaway here is first, track your transition, put it into an Excel sheet that shows your advisors that you're structured, that you are organized, that you're taking it seriously, that you're methodical, not just taking random intros that go nowhere. The other thing is that just because one person at a company says no does not mean that's the final answer. There are so many other approaches.
no, that last point is really important. There were many times that I, completely wrote off a company because I had a conversation that, I thought that was it. Um, and so, yeah, and going back, earlier on in the transition, I wish that I had been more methodical about keeping track of things. Fortunately, I learned that, from the transition team. But if I could say anything to people, that are just transitioning, it would be to have like keep track of that stuff, and make each conversation count. And through repetition, you will be able to tell your story more, and you will make progress,
It's
into some
almost
of
like
these
having a
companies.
it's almost like a math problem of like if you get a problem, an answer wrong, well then your advisors have a problem to look at. Well, let me
Yeah,
backtrack in the formula. Oh, you got this part of the
exactly.
formula. But if you don't have the formula laid out, then it's a whole
Yeah,
lot harder for people to help out with
you're
that.
just going to
And this is
repeat it again and again.
and this is also coming for someone who got a 2.79 GPA and failed business calculus 3 times. So don't take any advice I'm saying on math, but legend has it that that's how formulas work.
Well, I don't go around saying, my GPA at MIT. I just graduated. So,
Yours says MIT. Mine doesn't even have an MBA. They wouldn't even let me in.
it's
I'm like, this is absolutely awesome. Like, it is a
been a
huge
pleasure. Thank
win
you.
for you. And I think there are a number of takeaways, like private equity firms out there or just general operating companies. Keep this on your radar to hire chief of staff, director of special projects, general directors, VP of ops. We have so many members in 51 Vets that can fill that role at a variety of levels and experience. And I think the message to transitioning veterans is that we now have 10 to 20 examples of people in these types of roles at PE-backed companies. Be patient through your transition, be willing to go through a very ambiguous situation, but create structure as you iterate. And your aperture is going to slowly get more focused with each informational interview that is done and that is successfully considered and taken notes on, and you iterate it and you share it with your advisors and you get more feedback, you will find an answer. Be patient, hang in there. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us at 51vets.org, to our executive director, Lindsay Shiro, or chief of staff, Phil Wheeler. So, Mike, if you had one way to describe 51 vets and what it's been for you, either one word or just a few ways to describe it, what would it be?
It's been life changing for me. It really has been the community outside of the military that I just didn't think I would have again. Um, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say more. I'm truly grateful and really enjoy being part of that organization and want to continue to give back for years to come. So, thank you.
Well, this is awesome. Oh, man, it's great to see you
Great
and
to see you
wish
too.
you
Thanks
luck
for
in
having
this
me.
next endeavor with you. All right, buddy. See ya.
All right, take care.